The morning of March 20th, 2025, arrived with a crisp chill hanging in the air over Mar-a-Lago. Inside the sprawling estate, Barron Trump stood by his bedroom window, watching the Florida sun rise over the Atlantic. Today wasn't just any day, it was his 19th birthday. Yet, instead of the usual celebrations filled with extravagant parties and press coverage, Barron felt a pull towards something more personal. For weeks now, a question had gnawed at him. A question about the woman who had brought him into the world. His mother, Melania, had always spoken highly of the nurse who had been by her side during his birth in New York Presbyterian Hospital. It was the nurse who had held his tiny hand first, who whispered soothing words when he cried, and who had helped his mother recover during those precious first days. But who was she? Where was she now? Most teenagers wouldn't give it a second thought, but Barron wasn't like most. Growing up in the media spotlight had made him reflective beyond his years. He craved something genuine, something beyond the polished marble halls and political grandeur of his father's world. With his mind made up, Barron packed a small bag, slipped on a navy blue blazer, and headed downstairs. Donald Trump, now serving his second term as the 47th President of the United States, was already at work in the West Wing. But his mother sat quietly in the breakfast room, sipping her signature chamomile tea. "Mama, I want to go to Manhattan today," Barron said softly. Melania looked up, her blue eyes narrowing with concern. "Manhattan? For what, Barron?" "Today is your birthday. We have a dinner planned at the White House." Barron hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I want to find her. The nurse. The one who helped you when I was born." A flicker of surprise crossed Melania's face. She set down her teacup. "Why now?" she asked gently. He shifted on his feet, searching for the right words. I feel like I need to know. I want to thank her. She's the first person who touched me, who cared for me before anyone else did." Melania's face softened. She had always admired her son's thoughtful heart, so unlike the brashness of the world surrounding their family. With a quiet sigh, she reached into a sleek leather folder on the table, pulling out a crisp manila envelope. "I had a feeling you'd ask one day," she said, handing it over. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She was an experienced maternity nurse. "I haven't spoken to her in years, but if anyone can find her, you can." His heart raced as he took the envelope. Margaret Holloway. A name. A beginning. By noon, Barron was in the air, flying aboard a private jet bound for New York City. The skyline appeared through the window like a memory, familiar and distant all at once. He hadn't spent much time in the city since his father's presidency began, but today felt like a homecoming. As the car pulled up to Trump Tower, Barron barely paused to glance at the gold-plated entrance. Instead, he had a plan to visit New York Presbyterian Hospital where his journey had started 19 years ago. If anyone could help him find Margaret Holloway, it would be someone there. Inside the hospital's records department, Barron waited as the clerk, a cheerful woman in her 50s, typed furiously at her computer. "So, you were born in 2006, huh?" she mused, eyes scanning the screen. "Maternity ward staff." "Ah, here we are. Margaret Holloway. She worked here until 2015, but then she retired." Barron's heart sank. Retired? It was a dead end, or was it? "Any idea where she went?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The clerk smiled kindly. "Lucky for you, sweetheart, she didn't go far. Last address we have on file is in Harlem." Harlem. It wasn't what he expected, but it was a lead. And Barron Trump never backed down from a challenge. As he stepped back into the bustling streets of Manhattan, the city felt strangely alive, like it was guiding him towards something he couldn't yet see. Margaret Holloway was out there, and nothing would stop him from finding her. Barron's black SUV glided through the busy streets of Manhattan, weaving past yellow taxis and honking delivery trucks. The energy of the city buzzed around him, so different from the structured halls of the White House. Yet, for the first time in a long time, he felt free. His driver, a stout man named Carl, glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "You sure you want to head to Harlem, Mr. Trump?" he asked, concern etched in his voice. "Could be a wild goose chase." Barron, focused on the slip of paper with Margaret Holloway's last known address, didn't waver. "I'm sure, Carl. Let's go." As they crossed into Harlem, the skyscrapers of Midtown faded behind them, giving way to historic brownstones and vibrant murals. It wasn't the glittering world of Fifth Avenue, but there was a warmth to it, life happening in its rawest form. The car pulled up to a modest apartment building, worn but well kept. The address matched perfectly. Barron stepped out, feeling the brisk wind whip through his perfectly styled hair. He adjusted his blazer, exhaling slowly. This wasn't the kind of place anyone expected a Trump to visit, but that didn't matter. Today wasn't about politics. It was about something deeper. He buzzed the intercom. A crackly voice responded, "Who is it?" Barron hesitated. What was he supposed to say? "Hi, I'm the president's son looking for the woman who delivered me?" Clearing his throat, he answered, "I'm looking for Margaret Holloway." "Is she here?" Silence. For a moment, he thought the conversation was over, another dead end. But then, buzz. The door clicked open. His heart pounded as he climbed the narrow staircase to the third floor. Each step echoed through the quiet building. What if she didn't remember him? What if she didn't want to? When he reached apartment 3B, the door opened just a crack. An elderly woman peered through. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, and her brown eyes, soft but sharp, studied him carefully. "You're him, aren't you?" she said at last, her voice warm but cautious. Barron's throat tightened. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Barron Trump. I've been looking for you." A long pause hung between them before her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Well, don't just stand there, baby. Come on in." The apartment was small but cozy, filled with photos of family, a worn Bible on the coffee table, and the smell of fresh-baked cookies wafting through the air. It felt like the opposite of everything he had known growing up. Margaret shuffled to the kitchen. "Sit down, honey. You want some tea? I just made a fresh pot." Barron lowered himself onto the faded couch, his knees brushing against a crocheted blanket. "Yes, please. Thank you." For a moment, he watched her move. There was something familiar in the gentle care of her hands, the warmth in her voice. He tried to picture her 19 years ago, standing in the delivery room, holding him for the first time. She returned with 2 mugs, settling into a recliner across from him. "I knew you'd find me one day," she said softly. "Melania always had a feeling you were special. Different from the rest of him." Barron's heart swelled. "She still talks about you. She said you were her angel when she needed one." Margaret's smile grew wistful. "Your mama, she was scared. All the cameras, all the pressure, but when she held you, baby, nothing else mattered. You were her whole world. And mine, for a little while." He swallowed hard, emotion rising. "I wanted to find you because I never got to say thank you. You were the first person to care for me, to hold me. I'm here today because of you." A tear glistened on Margaret's cheek as she reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "Baby, you don't need to thank me," she whispered. "You were a blessing to me. I was going through a hard time back then, lost my husband, trying to hold on. But the day you were born, it gave me hope again." Barron blinked back tears. He had come seeking answers, but he never expected to find this connection, something real, something lasting. They sat together in silence for a while, 2 lives once intertwined by fate, now reunited by something even stronger. At last, Margaret squeezed his hand. "You came all this way to find me. That means more than you'll ever know." And for the first time in a long time, Barron Trump felt something no spotlight, no headline could ever give him: home. For the first time that day, Barron felt the weight in his chest lift. Sitting across from Margaret Holloway, he no longer felt like the president's son, he felt like someone who belonged. In her warm, humble living room, he wasn't being watched by cameras or judged by headlines. He was just a young man reconnecting with the very first person who had ever cared for him. Margaret wiped her eyes with a soft chuckle. "Look at me, crying like a fool. You'd think I'd have seen it all by now." Barron smiled, his heart still pounding. "I'm just glad I found you." She shook her head in wonder, still gripping his hand as if she feared letting go would make this moment disappear. "I can't believe you remembered me or even thought to find me. Most folks forget people like me once they leave that hospital. But you're different. I always knew you would be." Her words touched something deep inside him, something he hadn't even realized he was missing. Most people saw him as just a Trump, a symbol of power and privilege. But Margaret saw him as a person, a soul she had cradled in those fragile first hours of life. "Mama always said you were special," Barron said softly, taking a sip of the warm tea. "She said you stayed with her when no one else did. I wanted to know you. To thank you." Margaret's eyes softened with a distant memory. "Your mother was scared, baby. First time mama, all those cameras outside the hospital, and your daddy already in the middle of all that political noise. But when she held you for the first time, none of that mattered. You were her whole heart." Barron's throat tightened as he listened. He had grown up in the public eye, his every move dissected by the media. But here was someone who knew him before all of that, when he was just a newborn, helpless and innocent. "What was I like?" he asked, his voice softer now. Margaret's face lit up with a smile. "Oh honey, you were the calmest baby I ever met. Didn't cry much, just opened those big blue eyes like you were trying to figure out the world. I remember holding you one night while your mama slept. You just stared up at me like you already knew life had big plans for you." Barron laughed quietly. "I wish I still felt that calm." Margaret leaned forward, her gaze warm and knowing. "Life's heavy when the whole world's watching you. But underneath all that, you're still that same sweet boy. Don't let anyone make you forget it." Her words hit him like a wave of warmth. For years, he had felt the pressure to be perfect, to live up to the Trump name. But sitting here, in this simple apartment with a woman who had known him at his most vulnerable, it felt like none of that mattered. They talked for hours about the early days at the hospital, about how Margaret had almost left nursing but stayed because of the connection she felt with him and his mother. Barron hung on to every word, feeling a bond he hadn't known he needed. At one point, Margaret chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You know, I always wondered how you were doing. I followed your life here and there, saw you grow up in the public eye. But I never thought you'd come looking for an old nurse like me." Barron's smile grew. "I had to. I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed you something. You were there when it mattered most." Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Baby, you don't owe me anything. Knowing I made a difference in your life? That's more than enough for this old heart." A comfortable silence settled between them, two lives once separated by time and circumstance, now intertwined again in the most unexpected way. Finally, Margaret let out a sigh. "You're a good boy, Barron. Your mama raised you right. And no matter where life takes you, don't forget there's more to who you are than just your last name." Barron felt those words settle deep inside him. For years, he had felt like a shadow living under the immense weight of his father's legacy. But Margaret's words reminded him that he was more than that. He was his own person, kind, thoughtful, and searching for something real. As the clock ticked toward evening, Barron knew it was time to leave. The White House dinner awaited, and his absence wouldn't go unnoticed. But leaving felt harder than he expected. Margaret sensed it too. She stood slowly, her hands trembling just slightly as she reached for him. "Come here, baby," she said softly, pulling him into a warm embrace. For a moment, Barron let the world outside fade away. In her arms, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. A sense that, no matter where life took him, he would always have this connection to something pure and genuine. When they finally pulled apart, Margaret patted his cheek with a tender smile. "Don't be a stranger, you hear me? You know where to find me now." Barron nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't forget you, Miss Holloway. Thank you for everything." With one last glance around the room, he turned and stepped back into the cool Harlem evening. As the car pulled away, he felt something shift inside him, a sense of wholeness he hadn't known he was missing. And for the first time in a long time, Barron Trump didn't feel like the boy the world expected him to be. He felt like himself. At one point, Margaret chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You know, I always wondered how you were doing. I followed your life here and there, saw you grow up in the public eye. But I never thought you'd come looking for an old nurse like me." Barron's smile grew. "I had to. I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed you something. You were there when it mattered most." Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Baby, you don't owe me anything. Knowing I made a difference in your life? That's more than enough for this old heart." A comfortable silence settled between them, two lives once separated by time and circumstance, now intertwined again in the most unexpected way. Finally, Margaret let out a sigh. "You're a good boy, Barron. Your mama raised you right. And no matter where life takes you, don't forget there's more to who you are than just your last name." Barron felt those words settle deep inside him. For years, he had felt like a shadow living under the immense weight of his father's legacy. But Margaret's words reminded him that he was more than that. He was his own person, kind, thoughtful, and searching for something real. As the clock ticked toward evening, Barron knew it was time to leave. The White House dinner awaited, and his absence wouldn't go unnoticed. But leaving felt harder than he expected. Margaret sensed it too. She stood slowly, her hands trembling just slightly as she reached for him. "Come here, baby," she said softly, pulling him into a warm embrace. For a moment, Barron let the world outside fade away. In her arms, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. A sense that, no matter where life took him, he would always have this connection to something pure and genuine. When they finally pulled apart, Margaret patted his cheek with a tender smile. "Don't be a stranger, you hear me? You know where to find me now." Barron nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't forget you, Miss Holloway. Thank you for everything." With one last glance around the room, he turned and stepped back into the cool Harlem evening. As the car pulled away, he felt something shift inside him, a sense of wholeness he hadn't known he was missing. And for the first time in a long time, Barron Trump didn't feel like the boy the world expected him to be. He felt like himself. As Barron's SUV glided back toward Midtown, the sun dipped low over Manhattan, casting golden hues across the towering skyline. He leaned his head against the window, watching the city blur past, a city that had always seemed more like a symbol than a home. Yet today, in Margaret Holloway's small Harlem apartment, he had found a piece of himself he hadn't even realized was missing. His phone buzzed against his thigh. A text from his mother. "Melania, dinner starts at 7 o'clock. Are you on your way?" He smiled faintly, his heart still full from the afternoon. He typed back a quick response. "Yes. I found her, Mom." Almost instantly, 3 dots appeared. His mother was already replying. "Melania, you did? Is she okay?" Barron's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. How could he capture everything he had felt in that tiny apartment? How could he explain the warmth in Margaret's voice, the way her hands trembled when she touched his cheek, the peace he had felt in her embrace? He settled on something simple. She remembers us. And she's still an angel. When he arrived back at Trump Tower, the building gleamed against the fading light, a beacon of wealth and power. The doorman, familiar and formal, opened the car door for him. As Barron stepped inside, the polished marble floors reflected his image back at him, a reminder of the world he belonged to. He took the private elevator to the penthouse, adjusting his blazer as the doors slid open. The hum of conversation spilled into the hallway. Washington elites, media figures, and family friends gathered to celebrate his 19th birthday. The air smelled of imported roses and fine wine, a world away from Margaret's cozy home. Melania spotted him first. Her eyes, the same soft blue as his own, lit up with relief. She crossed the room swiftly, pulling him into a quiet corner before anyone else could reach him. "You found her," she whispered, cupping his face gently. "Tell me everything." He smiled, letting the warmth of her touch settle him. "She's okay, Mom. She still remembers the night I was born. She said you were scared, but when you held me, none of it mattered." Tears glistened in Melania's eyes as she exhaled shakily. "I was scared, Barron. But she was my strength. When your father had to leave for the press, she stayed with me. I don't know if I could have done it without her." For a long moment, they stood together, mother and son, wrapped in the weight of memories only they could share. In this world of cameras and power plays, this bond was real. "I wish you could have seen her," Barron said softly. "She still talks about you like your family. And she's proud of me, Mom." Melania's lips trembled into a smile as she touched his hair, smoothing it back like she had done when he was a little boy. "I am too, Barron. I'm proud of the man you're becoming." A deep voice interrupted the moment. "There's my birthday boy." Barron turned as Donald Trump approached, a towering presence as always. The former president's suit was sharp, his golden hair perfectly combed, but his eyes softened when they fell on his son. "You're late, kid. Big speech coming up, you ready?" Barron hesitated. For years, he had felt the pressure of living up to the Trump name. Always under the spotlight, always expected to be as bold and unshakable as his father. But today had changed something inside him. "Actually, Dad, can I say something different tonight?" Donald raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering in his expression. "Different? Like what?" Barron drew a slow breath, the memory of Margaret's words anchoring him. "I want to talk about people who aren't in this room. The ones who don't get the spotlight. People like Margaret. She's the nurse who delivered me, and she's the reason I'm here today." His father's face shifted from surprise to a rare look of approval. "That's good, kid. Real good." The older man clapped a hand on his shoulder, his usual commanding tone softening. "Speak from the heart, Barron. The world's listening." An hour later, the glittering ballroom fell silent as Barron stepped to the podium. Faces from Wall Street, Hollywood, and Capitol Hill watched him with curiosity. They expected the usual, another polished, careful statement bearing the Trump legacy. But Barron had something else to say. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. But there's someone who isn't here that I need to talk about, someone who changed my life." He paused, glancing toward his mother in the crowd. Her face was filled with pride and something deeper, understanding. "Her name is Margaret Holloway. She was the nurse who delivered me on March 20th, 2006. And today, on my 19th birthday, I finally got to meet her again." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. This wasn't the speech anyone had expected. In a world where power and names seemed to mean everything, I wanted to find the person who held me when I was just a baby. She didn't care about politics or headlines. She just cared about making sure I was safe. And today I got to thank her. His voice softened, emotion tightening his chest. "We talk a lot about greatness in my family. But today, I learned that greatness isn't just about power or success. It's about kindness. It's about the people who lift us up when no one's watching. Margaret is one of those people. And tonight, I want to dedicate this birthday to her. A wave of applause swept the room, louder, more genuine than anything he had heard before. His father nodded in approval, his mother wiped a tear from her eye, and for the first time in a long time, Barron felt like he had found his voice. As the night wore on, Barron slipped out to the balcony, letting the cool Manhattan breeze brush against his face. His phone buzzed, another message from Margaret. "Margaret, you made me cry, baby. I'm so proud of you." He smiled softly, his heart light. For years, he had been Barron Trump, the boy born into one of the most powerful families in the world. But tonight, he had become something else, a young man who understood that real strength comes not from a name, but from the people who love us when no one else is looking. And somewhere in a cozy apartment in Harlem, a nurse who had once cradled a future knew that her small act of kindness had shaped a life forever. Long after the last guest had departed and the glittering lights of the Trump Tower ballroom dimmed, Barron sat alone in his bedroom. The echoes of the evening still rang in his ears, the applause, his father's nod of approval, his mother's tearful smile. Yet none of it felt as profound as the simple warmth he had found in Margaret Holloway's living room. He unlocked his phone and scrolled back to her message. "You made me cry, baby. I'm so proud of you." Those words meant more to him than any headline, any handshake from a dignitary. In a world where so many people only cared about what his last name could do for them, Margaret had only ever cared about him. The clock struck midnight, his 19th birthday was officially over, but Barron felt like his real life was just beginning. He wasn't just the son of a former president. He was someone who had the power to make a difference, and tonight he had taken the first step. His thoughts drifted back to the afternoon, the worn edges of Margaret's furniture, the framed photographs of children she had delivered over the decades, the warmth of her hug. She had given so much of herself to others, yet her quiet contributions had remained in the shadows. Not anymore. A spark ignited in Barron's chest, a new sense of purpose. He opened his laptop and started typing. 1 month later, the story broke across every major news outlet. Barron Trump launches initiative to honor healthcare workers who serve in silence. In a statement released by the Trump Foundation, Barron announced the creation of the Margaret Holloway Award, an annual honor recognizing nurses and frontline medical workers who make extraordinary contributions behind the scenes. The first recipient, of course, would be Margaret herself. At the press conference, reporters crowded the hall, eager for sound bites. Barron stood at the podium, taller, more confident than ever, but his words weren't polished by a political speechwriter. They were his own. "I grew up hearing stories about the nurse who stayed by my mother's side when I was born. And on my 19th birthday, I had the privilege of meeting her. Margaret Holloway isn't just a nurse, she's a symbol of the kindness and dedication that holds this country together." He paused, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "For too long, people like Margaret have gone unrecognized. This award is my promise that their work will never be forgotten again." When he finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. But for Barron, the real moment came later when he stepped off the stage and found Margaret waiting in the wings. She stood in a soft lavender dress, her hair neatly curled, a tearful smile lighting up her face. The room faded away as Barron approached her. Without a word, he pulled her into a hug. "You didn't have to do all this, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Barron smiled against her shoulder. "Yes, I did. You matter, Miss Holloway. And the world deserves to know it." As the cameras flashed and the press scrambled for quotes, Barron Trump knew that he had found something more valuable than all the wealth and power surrounding him, a purpose rooted in gratitude and kindness. Years later, in a quiet park in Manhattan, a bronze statue stands tall, a tribute to unsung healthcare heroes. At its base, an inscription reads, "For those who hold us when we are at our most vulnerable, your kindness changes the world." Every year on March 20th, Barron visits the statue with Margaret by his side. Though his life remains full of obligations and expectations, one thing has never changed, his belief that the smallest acts of kindness ripple far beyond what we can see. And as he walks through the city, no longer just a name but a man with a mission, Barron Trump knows that a nurse named Margaret Holloway will always be part of his story, the woman who held his life in her hands and, in doing so, shaped his heart forever.